welcome to Media MD, your fortnightly dose of media that you have somehow missed. I'm Reuben Morehouse.
And I'm Elliot Diebold.
And we are back again to talk about Umbrella Academy again. So, Elliot, why don't you take us through what is the Umbrella Academy?
Yes. So, the Umbrella Academy is a group of, well, it's a TV show about a group called the Umbrella Academy, made up of 7 kids, basically. And
7
these
X-Men, we call them.
Yes, yeah, pretty much. So the weird thing about these kids is all 7 of them were born on the same day, and in fact, all of their mothers weren't pregnant when they had them. The start of that day. So it was like there was this day in 1989, 43 women around the world got pregnant, and they all gave birth, and this crazy billionaire guy, it says he went around the world trying to get as many of them as he could, and he only got 7, which to me actually seems like kind of a weak effort.
I mean, they were like he was trying to buy these children. I mean, yeah, adopt technically, but you know.
Yeah, but then on the other hand, we know that all 43 of these weren't planned. So, like, even assuming like some would want to keep them, I feel like 7, you know, and so, like having a kid and not really being sure what to do with it, and then having a billionaire come up and be like, "Hey, I want to buy it off you," and give it like the lifestyle of being raised by a billionaire, you know, it turns out that isn't great.
Especially such a seemingly kind and gentle parent as this billionaire seems to be.
Yeah. I mean, he makes it sound a lot better than. Well, it'd be easy to make it sound a lot better than it turns out being. But I don't know. 7 seems like a weird effort, but especially it's dropped that there were 43 right at the start, and I honestly spent most of the show expecting more of these superpowered kids
me too.
Adults to show up, and I was quite surprised that it stuck to only the 7.
I was expecting the villains of the show would be like, oh, we are long lost cousins and we've also got powers, but they just didn't. It's so much more grounded than that, which I mean, grounded probably isn't the right word because there's all kinds of weird shenanigans, but
no, it's very much the story of these 6 really, /7.
How dare you?
Kids and what they're going
Ben
through.
Ben is the most important of all of them.
I mean, it's shaped out like he's going to have more of a role in season 2, which I'm excited for, because what we did see of him was kind of interesting. But like it's very much the story of these 7 kids, and so it does actually kind of work that none of the others are introduced. And the twist that is around their birthday and the villain is a more interesting take on just having it be another one of their superpowered cousins, I guess is the word for it. But anyway, so let's talk about the 7, since they're the only ones who are really in it. You obviously have so one of the weird things that this billionaire does. So anyway, it turns out the billionaire is a terrible father.
No.
To varying degrees. There's actually some stuff I'd like to say on that later, but he didn't give them names. He actually let them choose names a bit later, which is actually kind of a good system. Like, you know, letting kids pick their names when they're a bit older actually kind of makes sense. But anyway, he gives them numbers, and I think it said at one point the numbers are based on how useful he thought their powers were, which I don't know how he told that when they were so young.
And that's wild as well, because he clearly fucked up with that numbering scheme.
His ordering was terrible. So number 1, who goes by Luther, has super strength. You know, he's kind of a boring power, really. And so he's also ginormous, and at first you think that's actually to do with his power or a side effect of his power, but it turns out later that that's like something that happened to him, and it was like to save his life they had to inject him with this serum that also made him like really big and hairy and kind of ugly. And that's like a more interesting version.
In the comics, I'm pretty sure he's actually like got the body of a monkey. Like, genuinely, his head has been put onto the body of a monkey. And this is their way of doing that without it being as ridiculous.
Yeah, because it is quite, like, gorilla-esque, his upper body. So I can see that. And so then number 2, I was never super clear on what his power is, but he can, like, throw stuff and it bends how he wants it to bend after he's thrown it, which is pretty cool, and he uses that with knives, effectively.
Yeah, he's just really good at throwing things, basically.
But he can curve them in a way
that...
like they bend it. He bends it way more than Beckham.
Beckham has nothing on number 2.
And so then number 3 has an interesting power, but it's probably the most interesting thing about it is the fact that they don't really use it in the show. and that she can say, if she says, I heard a rumor, and then makes something up, it's sort of, people act like it's true.
Yeah.
So she can convince people of lies, basically, by saying that she heard it as a rumor. And so she's like a famous movie star with a great husband and a kid, and it's pretty much implied that she didn't earn any of it, really. Like, she used her power to cheat her way to the top.
I really like Allison, number 3. I'm not going to call them by their numbers. That feels dehumanizing.
Sorry, yes. I stopped doing that after number 1. So number 2 goes by Diego, and number 3 goes by Allison. Yeah.
Yeah. The thing I really like about Allison is she doesn't use her power because right at the beginning of the show, or right before the beginning of the show, she she basically fucks up her perfect family by using it on her child, and her husband seeing this, and it obviously freaks him out. Not just that she would use it on her child, but probably I would interpret it as him thinking, oh, well, this explains why I just suddenly fell in love with you, or whatever, right?
Yeah, from his perspective, it would be hard not to really doubt your relationship with someone like that, especially if you do see her casually using it on your child. Yeah, you'd have very understandable doubts.
Yeah, she becomes very gun-shy about using it. I think justifiably so, because she kind of realizes that it's, I don't know, when you grow up in a family of superpowers, you're just like, of superheroes, you're like, oh, I can just use my superpower, it's fine. But her superpower is pretty fucked up to use on people.
Well, it's only really possible to use it in a manipulative way.
Yeah.
So, like, that's how she ends up using it, because I don't really understand what else he could do with it.
We've made it 7.5 minutes in, so let's just break this down now. It reminds me of Misfits. This is one of many comparisons to Misfits that I'm sure we'll be making. I can't remember the character's name. I think it's Alicia, whose power is that when she touches somebody, they want to have sex with her. And it's a power that is only possible to use in a way that is fucked up.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't make that connection at all, actually, but you're right. The way it's used is somewhat similar. I drew up more comparisons to a character whose name I've forgotten, but she was one of the leads in Alphas, which is a superhero show that was on Sci-Fi for 2 years. It was really good, got cancelled abruptly, which is par for the course on that network. But she basically had the same sort of power. Or she had Kilgrave's power from Jessica Jones. Like, whatever she said, people would be, like, compelled to do. And she was very similar to Allison in that her arc in the show started at the point where she was trying to redeem herself. Like, she'd lived this sort of hedonistic, manipulative lifestyle for a few years and had that epiphany where she realized that her life was quite empty when she was just getting everything she wanted in this hollow way. And so it was all about her trying to build a life like the legit way. And it's very similar to Allison's arc in a lot of ways.
I find that a very compelling story. And, you know, Kilgrave is another great comparison. There's a part in Jessica Jones where he's genuinely trying to redeem himself, right? And to me, that was the most fascinating part of that show. Similarly, I really love Allison's arc of how do you redeem yourself when a core part of your identity, since you were a child, is fucked up, right? I guess that probably applies to most of these characters, but with Allison, it's very, I really like it.
Well, it's fascinating because you're essentially being asked to reject part of who you are. Like, the powers are part of who they are.
Totally.
And Klaus is going through something similar, and that's my really good segue into talking about Klaus, who's number 4. And he's played by Robert Sheehan, and so his power is that he can see dead people.
Yep.
And as we learn towards the end of the season, maybe even do more than that. He can sort of bring them back to some extent. But basically, through a mixture of dead people being horrifying and the billionaire father being a shit father, Klaus really, really hates talking to dead people. So he's basically stoned out of his mind with whatever he can get his hands on all the time, because that stops his power from working.
Yeah, he's figured out he can turn off his power by being drunk or stoned or both all the time. And that's how he lives.
Yeah, and it's like, because he's sort of that stereotypical drug addict character that you do see in a lot of fiction.
Yeah.
But it kind of works this time because there's a real justification for him not wanting to change his ways. Like, obviously, drugs, warp your neural pathways and make it really hard to quit. So, it is a hard thing in real life to do. But I really like this Ada thing where, like, Klaus is permanently running away from something. It's a twist on this sort of character trope. Also, this common character arc that I think makes it even more impactful, because he doesn't just have to face his fear of, like, life without drugs, which is, like, already pretty tough to do, but he's also trying to run away from the fact that when he's sober, things are even more terrible because he's surrounded by ghosts.
Yeah, and we're kind of starting to flirt with one of the reasons I really want to bring this to the show, is because obviously fans of us will know that we're pretty big fans of a series called Worm, or Ward, written by Wild
I've heard of it.
Heard of it, yep. And the thing that I really love about Umbrella Academy is these powers aren't arbitrary, right? Like, who gets what power is not arbitrary at all. These powers are designed by, whatever, by the screenwriters, I guess, to emphasize the flaws that these characters have and kind of force them to, cycle. These powers really do make worse the character traits that these people have. And it becomes a very fun way of exploring personality to, mental illness even, I would say, by reflecting these characters off of their powers, and it's very fun.
It's kind of the opposite take from Worm. Like, not to get too much into Worm spoilers territory, but obviously in Worm you get a power that represents your issues as a character.
Yeah,
this is kind of the opposite, because what it is it's almost these characters were brought up and their lives were based around their powers. Like, their whole lives was about training to use their powers. And so it's like their issues are built around their powers. Whereas, so Worm builds powers around issues. In the Umbrella Academy, these characters have all had their issues come up around their power and the fact that they were raised in a stupidly horrible situation.
You're right. And I guess that makes it less pessimistic than Worm, in that for these characters there are ways to change and kind of accept themselves.
Yeah.
Whereas in Worm there are in-universe reasons why their powers constantly fuck them over.
So anyway, yes. Number 5, his ability is he can warp through space, and if he tries real hard, he can warp through time. And so he's in the body of a teenager still. Like, the majority of this series takes place when these guys are 30, and they've all come back for their father's funeral, but 5 is still stuck in his teenage body because he got stuck in the future. Whole bunch of shit happened to him there. He time traveled some more, but he's ended up coming back to stop an apocalypse that's happening in 8 days, and his whole life basically revolves around wanting to stop that.
Yeah, when they were quite young, he disappeared, and they never saw him again until the day that this series starts.
The pilot.
Until 20 years later, basically.
About 20 years, yeah. So then number 6 is dead. He died when they were teenagers, and that sort of is what broke up the original Umbrella Academy. And so this is obviously taking place like another 10 or so years after that. But one of the interesting things is Klaus basically has Ben, the number 6, kind of permanently around him. Like, even when he's really drunk or something, number 6 still seems to be around. So whether because of their close connection in real life or something, or whether that's like something Klaus is doing a bit subconsciously, Ben is almost a permanent fixture in Klaus's environment. Yeah,
and so number 6 kind of is now only really a character in the way that he interacts with Klaus, but still has quite an interesting position in the story, where he's kind of like the straight man and the guy who's trying to inspire Klaus to be better, when really all of the rest of his family have totally given up on him.
Yeah, well, it seems like he's the most normal one, and it's hard to know whether that was just him or whether it's because he, like, for lack of a better term, got out early. But
I guess it's hard not to have perspective when you literally are just perspective on life.
Yeah. And well, what's really interesting, I think, and this shows how much Klaus hates his power, is that none of his siblings are really aware that he has Ben around pretty much all the time. In the last few episodes, there's a bit where he mentions things Ben said, and they're like, "Oh, Ben? No, he's dead." And it's just
yeah, what the fuck are you talking about? Yeah.
Which is a weird thing to say to someone whose power is to bring back the dead, but that just shows how out of touch he is with talking about his power. He hasn't even told them that because he has a pretty good relationship with Ben. So it's weird that he hasn't even told his siblings that Ben's around. Like, he just doesn't want to be asked to use his power even more.
Well, I think it's probably fair to say that once Ben died, that really was the point where a lot of them went their separate ways. And so there probably hasn't been that much. I mean, I doubt Klaus has even seen them that much since that happened.
Well, that's true, but it's a weird thing not to bring up when you're back in touch, I guess.
It is true.
Anyway, and so then finally we get to number 7, the least useful, Vanya, played by Ellen Page. No powers. It's a shocking twist. Turns out she does have some later. I'll get to Vanya's whole arc later, because that's something we'll talk about. But that's basically the main 7. So also in this house, you always had the billionaire dad who died, who's mostly characterized in flashbacks. They have a robot mum who was made to take care of them, who's really mostly there for Diego's plotline, which is she's used really well there.
And to just add atmosphere, I would say. I think one of my favorite parts of this is in like episode 2 or 3, they're coming back and they're talking about dad, and they mention their mum every so often, but they never really linger on it. And you see snippets of her, and it just she just seems off and creepy until it all kind of falls into place.
In fact, there was a line I noticed. They're talking about their mum. I think it's in the pilot, and they mention that she has to go and just relax and recharge. And the whole scene is built to draw attention to the term recharge, even though you don't know what it means. And then later you learn she's a robot. And I was sort of like, oh, that's what that meant. Because they drew weird amounts of attention to the word recharge there. And so then I guess the other character is Pogo. Pogo's the worst. He's a monkey that lives in the house for some reason. That's not ever really explained, except that the billionaire made him an intelligent ape, I guess.
He's kind of the assistant to the billionaire, to Reginald.
Yeah.
I don't know why let's just call the characters by their names.
I actually forgot Reginald's name. That's why I've just been calling him the billionaire. I know the surname's Hargreaves, but I forgot.
Yeah.
I forgot his name was Reginald.
So you didn't like Pogo then?
Well, no, not really. I mean, he's the cause of most of the problems. He has this, I guess it's an understandable feeling of loyalty to Reginald after he died, but it's pretty clear Reginald was mishandling a lot of things. And Pogo keeps these plans in motion even after Reginald's passed away, to the emotional detriment of everyone he supposedly cares about. So I found Pogo very frustrating in that regard, because as the series goes on, he's constantly unveiling things, and you're just sort of there like, why didn't you say this 4 episodes ago when it could have stopped all the shit that just happened?
I think my one lingering question about that is, Pogo obviously was a creature that was designed. I suspect there's probably some programming in there that makes him loyal to Reginald.
Yeah, that's absolutely possible. And I mean, but then at that point he just has no free will. So what does it matter whether I like him or not? Like, he's just a robot.
Yeah, sure. I suppose.
I don't know, because it stood out to me a bit in episode 10. I think it's the last episode. Vanya kills Pogo. And I mean, I guess we'll see if that stacks up in season 2. But they acted like it was a big emotional thing. But I really felt like that was what he had coming in a way. Like, he had done so much dumb stuff to keep the family the way it was, that I think when it all came crumbling down, him heroically sacrificing himself to let the others escape was probably the least that he owed them. I felt it was appropriate.
He's basically their butler, right? Like, that's more or less.
Yeah, he's a monkey butler. Yeah.
The one thing I will say that I really liked about Pogo is the CGI on him was very good, like surprisingly good.
Yeah, did they borrow like the Planet of the Apes movies technology? Because
I don't know.
It looked about that good.
I mean, some of the effects in the show aren't that great, but I was really wowed by just how good the CGI on Pogo was.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyway.
And in fact, like, speaking of, like, I think something I really want to talk about when it comes to this show is it's very stylish, for lack of a better term. Like, it places a heavy emphasis on having like style.
Yeah. I think that's one of the strengths of the show. I mean, the characters are all quite strong, I think. The plot is pretty good. There are kind of some bits where it's weird and
it's hit or miss.
and yeah, and it does kind of feel like Reginald had this like precognitive ability to set up this very intricate plan, and it all kind of happens exactly correctly, which is
Well, there's a weird scene that opens the last episode, like episode 10, where he's in this weird, like, I don't know, other continent, other world or something. There's a bunch of rockets, and there's some weird flying things that I'm just guessing are the origins of the powers. Like, I think there's a lot more to him that we're going to get next season, because he's some sort of alien or interdimensional being or something.
It's weird. It's a thing that's kind of thrown in, and so I looked this up in the comics after, because I was like, what the fuck is this? And I think it is like he's from another planet or something, and obviously there's more to get into there, but it does feel like a bit of a weird inclusion that doesn't really come up.
Yeah, it was weird to open the episode, the final episode, with it, and then not address it for the rest of the episode. I don't really understand what it added, except making you think even more that this was all sort of something Reginald had planned. And so, I mean, I'm going to watch season 2, so we'll see where they go with that, but
Let's get back to the tone and the atmosphere, because you're right, and this is, I think, the real strength of the show.
Well, I mean, the opening 10 minutes is fantastic. So you have like a birth scene of what I presume is Vanya, but there's no real evidence anyway for that. It could be any of them. But then it goes into this great thing where it actually introduces all of them as they're grown up. And it does so, like, Vanya's playing violin, and so she plays Phantom of the Opera, and then she plays Think of Me Fondly, which are two great songs. They work really well on the violin. And, like, so it's like, as she's playing these, that's the music that is playing over the introductory sequences for all the other siblings, except for 5 and 6, because 5's in the future and 6 is nowhere. And so that 10 minutes is probably my favorite 10 minutes of the show. And I mean, I can't think of any other show off the top of my head that has an opening that's like this strong. Like, this is probably the strongest opening of any show ever. Like, it was such a efficient and stylish way to introduce all the characters really quickly. I loved it.
I think the show does some very interesting things with its tone. Like, it kind of is a comic book show, right? And it has these weird moments. Another one that springs to mind is, I think it's the end of episode 1. All the characters just kind of, you get this weird sequence of all the characters dancing alone in their rooms. And you
I really liked that one. I think that's the end of the first episode. Yeah,
and the camera kind of shows each of them dancing alone in their rooms, and you zoom out and you see this like dollhouse view of everybody dancing, and it's very strange, and it doesn't the fact that they do this isn't like plot relevant or anything. It's kind of there just to be to set up the style and tone of the show, and it really kind of blows it away, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, something this show does that's not really unique or original for this show, but most of the fight scenes take place over like old like pop songs, basically, I guess.
Yep. Feels kind of Guardians of the Galaxy, I would say, in that respect.
And I think this show does a really good job of that, and I enjoyed it the whole way through. Like, so it wasn't groundbreaking, but I think they did a really solid and consistent job of making it fun. Like, they were all great, energetic songs, and kind of conflicted with what was happening on the screen in a way I liked. So the interesting thing about the style to this show for me was about almost 12 months ago now, I want to say. I got into the show Legion. Well, no, actually, that's not true. I didn't get into it. I watched the show Legion. Both my sisters are obsessed with it, and they'd been on me to watch it, and so I actually sat down to watch it with the idea that I would bring it to MediaMD as soon as I was done, because I knew you hadn't seen it, and they were going on about it.
It's still on my to watch list.
I hated it, and so that's why it never came here, because I hated it, and the reason was because it was all style and no substance, and in a lot of ways, the Umbrella Academy's style reminded me of Legion. But I liked it in the Umbrella Academy, and I didn't like it in Legion. And it was because, like, my big complaint with Legion is the plot and the characters are really bad in Legion. Like, well, the characters have potential, but they're never used because the plot is such a mess. And so it's kind of like, I think Legion is style over substance, whereas for me, style is something. It's like the icing on the cake, but you need like plot and characters and stuff underneath it. Otherwise, you just got a bowl of icing, which I guess is great. You know, when you're young and you want the sugar, but I'm too old for that shit now.
So yeah, I agree. I think the substance of the show is the characters, right? And we haven't even touched on my favorite character, who is Hazel.
Yep.
Yeah. Do you want to sum up who Hazel and Cha Cha are?
Yeah. Well, so part of Five's whole plot that gets uncovered eventually is that he worked for this time bureau-esque thing that enforces that time stays the same and people don't disrupt time. And part of that organization is having assassins that they send into certain time periods to kill certain people.
Assassins. Yeah.
Yeah, basically. And so Five was a legendarily skillful one of these.
Well, because he can teleport. I feel like he had an advantage.
Yeah, he did have an edge. And so basically he's now defected. So his plotline is essentially that he's defected. He's trying to stop the apocalypse that's meant to happen.
Yeah.
And so Hazel and Cha Cha are the two second best seemingly time assassins, and so they're sent to basically take him out.
So we're introduced. These characters are antagonists for the majority of the series, right?
Oh, they're so hard to hate, though. Like
I know so they show up. They basically go around wearing animal masks and just shooting things, right? For at least the first 4 or 5 episodes. But then we get this weird arc where Hazel, one of them, basically falls in love with a soon to retire waitress at a donut shop, who is like 30 years his senior, and it's this very weird. It's like this romance that you don't expect, and it leads Hazel to kind of have this entire arc of like questioning his career that he's unhappy with, and it's such a fascinating story, and it just makes Hazel so goddamn likable.
I think the reason Hazel and Cha Cha worked for me, so like the reason that you can't hate them even from the start is because they are almost immediately introduced like in their own scenes, and basically they come across as like worker bees who are really frustrated with the bureaucracy of their organization, and that just immediately makes you relate to and like them. Like, you know, everyone hates their boss and the lack of benefits that they're getting in their job. So it's immediately like they're set up as worker bees who are just at the whims of the man, and that immediately makes you like them. I think is why it works so well. And I agree. It's Hazel's arc is very interesting. Cha Cha's as well she bounces around a bit more, I think, and is less anchored, but she almost exists, I think, more to make Hazel's arc enhance Hazel's arc. Like, I think she enhances his arc, whereas taken in isolation, hers is just kind of, I don't really understand exactly where it ended up.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're definitely a highlight, and obviously as the antagonists for the majority of the show, they add the conflict as well, which is nice.
It's interesting to even call them antagonists, because I guess they kind of are, but this show doesn't seem to worry too much about... I mean, it's not about, it's us versus them. In more ways, it's us versus the apocalypse. So I wanted to touch on something that I think the show received kind of some criticism for. I'm curious what your take on it is, which is there's an episode, and I can't remember what number episode it is, but it's
going to be number 6. This is going to be the one where they just undo the whole episode and the whole thing was pointless. Is that where we're going with this?
That's the one I'm talking about.
Did I answer your question? I'm definitely on the negative side of the point of this episode. Because for me, it does some really interesting stuff, like episode 6. So, you know, for instance, the big one, I think, is that 1 and 3, or Allison and Luther, actually profess their love to each other. Yeah. And then it sort of gets undone. And I think for something like that to work, I think what would have to happen is it would have to be like revelations or something that were happening that weren't undone for me, the viewer, when the thing was undone. Like, because we already knew 1 and 3 had the hots for each other. And so to see them get together and then immediately have it undone, like, it didn't really add anything to their relationship except just frustration later on when they weren't together. And similarly, like Vanya, that's when she first discovers that sinister man whose name I forgot.
Leonard? Is it Leonard?
Yes.
He looks a bit like
Harold
Lin-Manuel
/
Miranda.
Leonard. He plays a recurring character in the later seasons of Orphan Black, and that was all I could see when he was on. But so he's evil, and it's super obvious from the start, so it's not really a shocking twist but Vanya discovers that he's evil at the end of this episode 6, and also discovers some of the truth of her power, I'm guessing, because she reads his book. And then that's almost immediately undone. And again, like, so I don't understand what the point of any of it was. Like, I think if you're going to have to do something like this, it'd have to be an actual revelation. Like, it was super obvious that he was evil. It was super obvious that Vanya had powers. It was super obvious that one of three were into each other. So sort of having it all happen and then undoing it doesn't really add anything, I don't think.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think I'm more positive about the episode. I think my least favorite part about it was the Leonard and Vanya bit, because that was, you're kind of just waiting for the other shoe to drop for Vanya at this point.
Well, that's like that's my TLDR of the Umbrella Academy. Really, is pretty good except for the Vanya bit.
Let's get back to that in a second. The part with 1 and 3 didn't bother me as much, because you kind of just get to experience what it would be like if they did do that, and then the story kind of doesn't go that way. They don't actually ending up together because things go wrong in the actual version. And so I did like seeing a moment of them kind of having a nice... They have like a dance sequence, which is nice. And then the other part about it, the part about the episode that I really liked is you see Hazel and Cha-Cha are set against each other. And the episode ends with Hazel killing Cha-Cha, right?
Well, this is the one part of the episode I would agree definitely works, and this is what I'm talking about recontextualizing stuff. So I think in episode 6, the one that gets erased, we see it all from Cha-Cha's perspective, where she gets an order to kill Hazel, and so she's like wrestling with whether or not she's going to do that for the whole episode. And then in episode 7, as we're sort of repeating the day, we see it from Hazel's perspective, and we learn that he also got orders to kill Cha-Cha, and then eventually he learns that they were pitted against each other, and it's sort of a whole thing. But like I think that's an example of where the concept does work, because we see the different events from different perspectives. But you almost like it could have just been where there was no time reversal needed for that to really be shown from the two perspectives,
You're right. I think that's the part that really made me like the episode, is just you get to see another perspective, and you also it adds so much tension to the way it resolves, because you kind of know, oh, these are the beats that we're going to hit, and it adds so much tension to them because things start going slightly differently, and you're like, oh shit. I mean,
I think that's
just
when
I'm worried that Hazel's going to die, honestly.
Yeah. I think something like this works when I think the message would have to really be whatever changed, like when we're seeing the second go, what was different. Like the snowball effect is basically saying, like if everyone ends up more miserable, which is kind of what happens, you're essentially saying that the snowball effect is whatever changed it, which in this case is 5 coming back from being stuck in the past again, because getting stuck in different times is sort of his thing. So he comes back, and that's what sets off the events changing in episode 7. And so, like you could kind of read it as saying, oh, well, 1 and 3 aren't together and aren't happy because of his interference or whatever. But that's not really how it comes across, because that doesn't really gel with any of the other timelines. And also, like, he's trying to stop the apocalypse. It's hard to hold it against him for disrupting their relationship for 5 days to stop the apocalypse. So yeah, I don't know. Like, if there'd been a consistent theme to the changes in the timeline that revolved around it all being 5's fault and questioning whether his interference is actually helping, I think I would have found it more interesting.
Yeah, I think it makes stabs towards that where, around that time we're getting into things about 5 kind of being willing to kill people, and is it right for him to just be willy-nilly changing history? But you're right, that doesn't all it doesn't quite tie together enough. And so I mean, like talking about some of those similar, because I think the show does a good job of bringing up a bunch of kind of classic superhero moral quandaries with that, but I think it handles a large variety of them, which is kind of why it works. So like Diego is sort of the classic vigilantism type thing, and then he's also got some more personal issues relating to
his being number 2, his whole issue is that he's not number 1.
Yep.
And so he's constantly trying to seem tough and impressive to everyone. And that's where Grace, the robot mum, comes in as really valuable in his plotline, because she's kind of the one person he can be himself with. And she helped him get over a stutter. And all that. So yeah, like we're touching on like a lot of this stuff, and Luther is your classic kind of super strength guy trying to be a leader and coming to terms with the fact that maybe he isn't a natural leader and their dad was a fuck up.
Not just that, maybe that he seems to invest so much in the idea of the team, and his arc is really about his disillusionment with that concept. And it never really. I think he's one of the few people that ends up in a much worse place than they start the season in.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah, and then obviously we already touched on how Allison's basically coming to terms with not using her power and trying to reform the relationships with those in her family. As that's the closest thing to genuine relationships she's got.
I quite like all of their arcs. It does feel like they all have important arcs, right? They all have. Yeah. It's so interesting because you compare this to a lot of superhero media where there's a core team of heroes, and the story is really about one of them, right? The story's about the leader of the team most of the time, or whatever. But this isn't like that. Apart from Ben, who obviously kind of isn't. He's a bit weird to consider one of the main characters.
Yeah.
They all have clear arcs and clear ways that their characters develop. In Luther's case, in a kind of less healthy way, but for the rest of them, they all grow as people, right?
Yeah, I mean, you could argue that Luther's getting more healthy because he's not deluding himself, but it's certainly short-term negative effects from that.
He's definitely less happy.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of arcs, I think it's time that we talk about the white violin in the room.
Yeah, that was weird.
Let's talk about the way that Vanya's arc resolves and what you thought of it.
So obviously, it ties into Five's a bit. So to quickly touch on Five, obviously he's time traveling, trying to stop the apocalypse because he's the one who knows it's coming. And essentially all of that boils down to him coming to terms with doing the wrong thing for the right reasons is basically Five's challenge. And just being crazy. Like, I love his relationship with the mannequin Dolores. That was a nice.
It's awesome.
That was a nice
kind of
touch.
reforming attachments to people as well is a big theme throughout Five's arc.
Yeah, you're right, because he's been alone for 30 years. Like, even though he's in the body of someone going through puberty, he's the mind of like a 60-year-old or something. So he's been alone for over 30 years, and then he went into a job assassinating people, which probably didn't do much for his forming connections attribute. So he's trying to turn into a normal person a little bit again. But anyway, so Vanya starts the show. So her whole bit is basically that she didn't have powers, and so their father was just an absolute twat to her for her whole upbringing, and kept her separate from the others, and just made her play violin a bunch. And now she's grown up, and she's sort of defined by her mediocrity in her life. Until she meets a roguish young violin enthusiast named Leonard. He's clearly evil. He turns out to be a villain. He's basically a kid who was born on the same day as them due to a natural pregnancy. And his father was abusive, and so he wanted to be part of the Umbrella Academy, and I just love that he was born on the same day as them, but isn't powered. Like, it was such a great... That was the one part of the whole development of that arc I really enjoyed. Because he's basically the bad guy from The Incredibles in a lot of ways. Yeah,
you're right. He kind of takes it upon himself to manipulate things to get himself power and get revenge on the Umbrella Academy at the same time for a perceived slight that is a pretty unfair perceived slight on his part.
Well, that's true, but then also Hargreaves, like Reginald, was an unnecessary dick to him about it. So you reap what you sow there.
Well, I don't know, Elliot. I've had people be unnecessarily dickish to me in my life, and my personal purpose doesn't become just to exact revenge on them.
No, that's true.
But
that's
I guess
true,
he's banked a lot on becoming a member of the Umbrella Academy. Anyway.
Yeah. So it turns out he gets a hold of Reginald's diary after Reginald dies and Klaus throws it out, and he discovers Vanya's secret, that she was actually the most powerful of them, and in fact her power was so out of control that Reginald had Allison tell her, or do the rumor thing to make Vanya forget that she had a power.
Yeah,
and then Vanya was brought up believing she didn't have one. And I've hated on Reginald and his child rearing skills a lot throughout this episode, but I do have to say Vanya in the flashbacks that we see was a little psychopath who was basically Jean Grey from X-Men 3.
But yeah, she murdered, or maybe not murdered, but at least injured a bunch of people with her power.
I actually think this is one of the few correct decisions Reginald probably made. Being unnecessarily unkind to her for the rest of her upbringing was dumb, but removing her knowledge of her own powers, I actually think was probably a good call, because she was turning into a little psychopath.
Did it cause the apocalypse though? Maybe.
No, what caused the apocalypse was Luther not listening to Allison when she said to let her out and to just give her a hug. I was getting so frustrated watching that. But the good kind of frustrated. When you're watching characters make bad decisions, but it's in character, so you can't really complain, but you're just like, no, don't do it.
Yeah, Luther keeps making bad decisions throughout the second half of the story, but I actually really quite liked Allison and Vanya's relationship.
And how it develops,
that was a real strength to me of the second half of the show, because they do eventually lock up Vanya while they're trying to figure out what happens, and Allison is the one who consistently is on her side, even when Vanya loses control and kind of cuts her throat with her power, causing her to lose her ability to talk.
Which, given her power and her current issues with her power, is actually not the worst thing. But I agree. I think the way Allison is she starts at trying to prove to Vanya that she's legitimate and that she wants to rekindle their relationship, and Vanya gives her a chance, decides that she isn't genuine because she's trying to come between her and Leonard. Of course, Allison was right, but essentially the whole thing comes down to Allison proving to Vanya that she's legit, and it's by the time that case is actually made, Vanya's little psychotic side has come back out as she stopped taking her pills and has got her power back.
Yeah. And then the show ends with Vanya causing the apocalypse. I mean, 5 said it was coming, and it does.
Yes, and so the last thing is the rest of them... Oh, no, actually, they managed to get Vanya after she shot a laser that blows up the moon and stuff. So the moon was important. Luther was right. So I actually do think that's going to be a thing in season 2, is his knowledge of moon rocks, because he was taking samples all the time, will actually be important for some reason. But yeah, anyway, so they managed to get Vanya and escape with 5 traveling them all through time. So, and it's a great sort of cliffhanger. I would be mad if there was no season 2, because I want to see where it goes. Yeah. But this whole thing with Vanya, it's frustrating to watch at the end, because the solution of just giving her a hug is really obvious, and Allison's the only one who sees it, but she's powerless to do anything. But as I said, I think that's frustrating in a good way. But where it really falls flat to me is just, I think her arc with her and Leonard/Harold is way too
predictable.
Obvious. It's a very finding out that she's actually the most powerful one was just, it's something you predict kind of right from the start.
It unravels a bit too slowly. You get the hint of it, and then it takes 4 or 5 episodes for it to really come to fruition.
I think this show does a fair bit of people communicating poorly, and so then there's issues that come up because they just didn't talk to each other properly, which is a little bit of a pet peeve of mine. But it didn't bother me quite as much in this show, because given the upbringing these characters had, it's very reasonable for them to have terrible communication skills. So I'm willing to buy it a bit more, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's interesting. Maybe that is a good way to describe this show, because it does have, we've kind of touched on a bunch of flaws that we both felt about the show, but it really does feel like more than the sum of its parts in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Well, I think as I sort of said, like I've criticized various bits of the plot, and yeah, as I said, Vanya's plot is particularly weak, which is a shame because it really feels like the main thread that's kind of carrying the core of the show. Like, she feels like the main character, the way she's introduced and the way it all revolves around her at the end. So it's a shame that that's probably the weakest, and it's also the shame because Ellen Page is great as you'd expect, so it feels like she's being wasted as well on it.
Yeah.
I'm more interested to see what they do with her in season 2. I think the concept of Vanya will probably be redeemed in season 2 as they take this sort of predictable story to the next step, which is not somewhere I've seen that sort of thing go too often before. So I think it'll be a bit fresher. So I'm more interested to see where they go with that in season 2. But yeah, I think overall most of the characters and their arcs are very interesting. The overall plot is engaging enough to keep you interested, and then, as I said, the style is that icing on top, which just makes it much more captivating than it would be if it was just the plot and characters with like a normal visual style.
Yeah. Okay. So to wrap it up,
yes,
let's give it a number, huh?
So to quantify those feelings, I want to give this an 8 out of 10. I have criticized it a lot, but I did actually find myself quite addicted. Like, I watched 6 of the 10 episodes in one day when we had a public holiday here. I sat down to watch one in the afternoon and ended up, late in the evening rushing out to get dinner at like 9 p.m. Because I'd accidentally watched 6 episodes.
Very relatable.
Yeah, so I guess that's the Umbrella Academy.
Awesome. So I brought you the Umbrella Academy last fortnight, Elliot. What do you got for us this fortnight?
Yeah. So have we actually brought up yet? This is our 100th episode.
Yay! Woo woo!
Yeah. And so I really wanted to bring something quite
that
big.
Had 100 episodes.
Stargate Atlantis has 100 episodes. So no.
Yay!
No, I did want to bring something big, but I kind of blew my ultimate big time recommendation last time when I brought you Game of Thrones. So this
still getting through that. Still so many spoilers that I have to avoid, Elliot.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I kind of hate that I'm hooked on it now because I have to care about avoiding Game of Thrones spoilers.
Yeah, but so this fortnight I've brought something a little bit more reserved. Like, I don't think this is going to blow anyone away as much as like something like Game of Thrones would, but I think this is very much something that fits the bill of the show, because I had never heard of this until somebody mentioned it to me briefly online, and I looked it up, and the premise was interesting enough that I checked it out, and then after I finished it I went to like learn more about it, and there's basically nothing online. Like, the whole world seems to have missed this show, which is weird because I found it really enjoyable.
Okay.
And so this fortnight I'm prescribing everyone Comrade Detective, which is
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, right? Like, there's very little written about this online. So it's an Amazon original series, but it only has 1 season, and it aired in like early 2017, I think, so it doesn't look like there's gonna be any more, but I think that's fine. It tells its story. So it's basically a mini-series of 6 episodes, and
I'm just looking at it now. It's got Channing Tatum and Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Nick Offerman in it.
Yeah, yeah.
How has it not been more, more seen?
I that was actually part of what drew me in, is when this person told me about it online. I did the same thing as you. I immediately went and Googled it briefly and was like, why haven't I heard of this when it's got those 3 in it? So
oh my God.
It's a little bit hard to explain. So I'm gonna do my best to frame it.
I'm reading the plot summary. I like the byline of it now, and it sounds bonkers.
Yeah, well, this is good because that'll hopefully help me get it across, so we can make sure that the listeners are getting it too. So Channing Tatum is in it, and he's also one of the executive producers, and he's joined by another guy whose name I can't remember, and they're basically presenting what they claim is a restored Romanian communist propaganda detective show. And so the majority of the show is dubbed footage from this Romanian detective show, and every now and then it cuts back to Channing Tatum and this other guy kind of talking about the history of the show and why they fell in love with it in the 80s and why they're so glad it's being restored and dubbed into English now.
Weird.
And so originally the creators actually wanted to use real Romanian cop show clips for the TV show, but that proved to be like too restrictive. So what they did is they've actually filmed this in Romanian. It was like a Romanian production team who filmed the whole thing in Romanian, and then like Nick Offerman and Channing Tatum and stuff dub over that in an intentionally like corny kind of way.
So weird.
And so I think you'll be familiar with a bit of the humor, because some of the humor comes from the dubbed nature of it, which is stuff like, we've talked about Yu-Gi-Oh! The Abridged series and things, and it kind of does some similar jokes in that regard, but I still think they work. But yeah, this premise of a fake communist propaganda series really works because they use that to make jokes at the expense of capitalism, at the expense of communism, and at the expense of like propaganda in general. And I found all those funny. And then the plot and the characters are pretty good as well. I think they're intentionally kind of over the top because it's meant to be like an 80s TV show.
Yeah.
But I found it engaging enough with those, and I thought the humor and just the bizarreness of the concept really carried me through the 6 episodes.
Oh, only 6, huh?
Yep. And it's not like episode of the week. Like, obviously, I would not bring you a police procedural that's case of the week, because we've been down that road.
About this.
No, this is one mystery that carries through all 6. Like, it's really like a mini series type deal.
Yeah.
And it's a solid enough mystery, but it's really the show's carried by its bizarreness and this weird sense of humor that's poking fun at politics in all shapes and sizes.
Yeah. Well, I'm definitely very sold on this show. It sounds very strange and right up my alley. I think we've talked about this before on the show, Elliot, but there's what is it? This weird animated redub show that I've forgotten the name of, where an English team took a failed Japanese anime and brought the
Ghost
rights
Stories.
To it. Ghost Stories, that's
yes.
it.
I think I watched that separately with my sisters after talking to you about it on here and talking to them, and they're like, "Oh, it's great," and I watched the whole thing with them, and it's so it was an animated series in Japan that sort of didn't do very well. So when they were dubbing it into English, they were told they could rewrite the script however they wanted. So they did it. They got like a team of like comedians sort of together and did it without a script and just made shit up as they went, and it's hilarious.
A very improvisational comedy dub,
yeah,
which is such a wild concept, and I love weird like new concepts for things like this, and it sounds like Comrade Detective is kind of fitting this bill as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like nobody could argue that it's a unique premise, if nothing else. Regardless of it. Like I think the majority of the critical consensus was quite positive, and I did enjoy it, but I think even if you didn't enjoy it, you'd have to give it props for just like the bizarreness of the premise and how well they do it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to go and watch it now. So I guess we'll check in a fortnight and see how it goes.
Yeah.
I guess that brings us to the end of Media MD for this fortnight. We'll be back in a fortnight to talk more about Comrade Detective. So thanks for listening to the show. If you want to catch up with us and make sure you're staying on top of the episodes, make sure you are following us on Twitter, which is at mediamdpodcast.
Yeah, and through that Twitter account, we also give you updates on our other show, Deep Impact, which I think yesterday we just started Arc 6. So it's heating up, but there's still time to catch up. And I still have talked to a few people who've just started and are catching up, so you won't be alone.
And there are definitely people who just start and try and keep up, and before we know it, they're way in front of us. So it's the kind of thing that once you get into it, it'll be more of a struggle to keep up than you'd think.
Yeah, you'll be struggling to slow down, not keep
totally.
up. Yeah.
If you enjoyed the show and you want to support the show, then the best way to do that is to leave us a review on iTunes, which helps us, get out in front of more people.
Mm-hmm. You can also contact us and leave comments, not just on iTunes and not just on Twitter, but also at our email, which is mediamdpodcast@gmail.com.
Now, that's a lot of things to remember, but luckily you don't have to remember them. Forget all those. The only one you actually have to remember is head to our website, mediamdpodcast.com, and you can find links to do all of the things we just mentioned. Find all of our shows.
Why did we mention them then?
I know, who knows? Find our shows, follow us on Twitter, leave us a review, as well as you can see all of the clues for the Media MD ARG. You can help us figure out just who is Dr. MD and why are his superheroes so depressed. Elliot, why don't you tell the listeners this fortnight's clue?
Cables.
Was that cables or tables?
Cables with a C.
Okay, cables, and we will see you next fortnight.